You do not break rules out there because you are reckless. You break them because you think you understand them. Because you believe experience gives you permission to bend them slightly. That you can make an exception and still remain in control. That is how it begins. Not with danger, with confidence. My name is Aaron Cole. I am a federal park ranger assigned to Congaree National Park in South Carolina. I have been in service for 13 years. 9 of those have been spent inside the Congaree swamp system. If you have never been inside Congaree, understand this first. The place does not behave like land. It behaves like something that never finished becoming solid. The forest grows out of floodplain water. Bald cypress rise directly from black, standing water. Tupelo trees twist upward from mud that does not hold weight consistently. The ground shifts. Sometimes it supports you. Sometimes it collapses without warning. There is no visible distinction between the two states. Sound behaves incorrectly. You can hear something behind you that is actually in front of you. You can hear movement that produces no visible disturbance. At night, the swamp does not become silent. It becomes selective. It allows you to hear only what it wants you to hear. Our official jurisdiction covers just over 26,000 acres. Floodplain forest. Protected ecosystem. Wildlife habitat. On record, our responsibilities are standard. Search and rescue. Wildlife management. Visitor safety. Trail monitoring. That is what is written. That is not what we do. There are 12 entries in our internal reporting system that do not exist in public documentation. They are not classified in the traditional sense. They remain undocumented externally because defining them would require acknowledgement of patterns that cannot be explained through environmental or wildlife behavior. Each entry is a rule, not a guideline, not a recommendation. A rule. Every rule exists because someone violated it. Every violation resulted in loss. The first recorded incident tied to the current rule system occurred in 2009, early spring. Flood levels were higher than average that year. Water stood nearly waist deep in certain sections of the western floodplain. A volunteer survey assistant named Mark Ellery went missing during a boundary check near Weston Lake. 32 years old. No prior incidents. Experienced with wetland terrain, he broke Rule 1. At the time, Rule 1 did not exist. It was written because of him. The last confirmed radio transmission from Ellery came in at 14:17 hours. He reported hearing someone calling for help approximately 50 meters off his marked path. The voice was described as female, distressed, repeating a single phrase. Over here, he acknowledged deviation from route. He stated he would investigate. That was the last coherent transmission. The search team reached his last known location 3 hours later. There were no signs of struggle, no tracks indicating forced movement, no drag marks, no blood. Only his equipment. His pack was found secured to a cypress root approximately 4 feet above water level. Not dropped. Not scattered. Placed. His radio was still active. Battery intact. Playback logs captured the final 60 seconds before signal loss. The voice was present on the recording. It did not match any registered personnel. It did not match Ellery. It was calling from multiple directions at once. The phrase remained the same. Over here, after that incident, Rule 1 was written. Rule 1 states, do not respond to any human voice off trail unless visual confirmation is established first. That rule has been broken 6 times since it was implemented. None of those individuals were recovered alive. The problem is not that something is mimicking people. The problem is that it understands why you would respond. That is the difference between an animal and something that studies you. The swamp does not produce random anomalies. It produces patterns. And every pattern we have documented interacts with human behavior in a specific way. That is why the rules exist. Not to protect you from the swamp, but to prevent the swamp from using you. Understood. Continuing seamlessly. The second entry was not written immediately after the first. That is something people misunderstand when they read summaries of the report. They assume we identified a threat and then constructed a full system around it. That is not what happened. The rules came slowly. Each one was forced into existence. The swamp does not escalate quickly. It studies first. Rule 2 was written in 2011. It followed an incident that, at the time, we misclassified as environmental disorientation. That classification was corrected 3 weeks later, after the recovery team submitted their full report and the audio logs were reviewed without redaction. The subject was a seasonal ranger. Name was Elliot Vance. 26 years old. Assigned to perimeter patrol and visitor guidance. 6 months into his first rotation. He was not inexperienced. That is important. He had prior training in wetland navigation. He had completed orientation. He knew the boundaries. He knew the first rule. He did not break Rule 1. He followed something else. On June 14, 2011, at approximately 1842 hours, Vance radioed in a visual anomaly. His exact wording was recorded and preserved in the internal log. He said, "There's a dry section ahead that shouldn't be here." That statement does not sound unusual unless you understand the terrain. Congaree does not produce sudden dry ground during peak flood season. Not in that region, not at that elevation. If there is dry ground, it is mapped. It is known. It does not appear. Command instructed him to hold position and verify coordinates. He did not hold position. He moved toward it. That decision is the entire reason Rule 2 exists. The last confirmed transmission from Vance came at 1847 hours. He said, "It's stable. I'm stepping onto it." After that, there was silence for approximately 11 seconds. Then he spoke again. His tone had changed. He said, "This isn't right." There was no further explanation. The signal remained active for another 32 seconds before disconnect. Search teams were deployed immediately. Flood conditions delayed full entry until early morning. They found him at 07:13 hours. Standing. That is the word used in the report. Not floating. Not submerged. Standing. He was positioned approximately 30 meters from his last recorded coordinates. There was no dry ground in that location. There has never been dry ground in that location. He was standing on water that did not support the recovery team. When the team approached, they sank immediately. Standard depth, chest high. Vance did not move. He remained upright until physical contact was attempted. The moment one of the recovery personnel reached for him, he collapsed. There was no resistance, no reaction. The body was recovered. Cause of death was listed as drowning. That classification is technically correct. What is not correct is how long he had been dead. Based on body temperature and condition, medical evaluation concluded that death had occurred at least 6 hours prior to recovery. That places time of death at approximately 0100 hours. He had been standing for over 6 hours. Unsupported. In water that did not hold him. That is not the part that resulted in Rule 2. The part that resulted in Rule 2 was what we found in his audio log. His body camera remained active. Video feed was unusable. The lens was obstructed by water and organic debris shortly after his final transmission. Audio remained clear. At 1848 hours, approximately 1 minute after his last verbal transmission, a secondary voice was detected. It was not environmental. It was not wildlife. It was not Vance. The voice was calm. Neutral. Close to the microphone. It said, "Stay where it is safe." The phrasing was wrong. Not "stay where you are," "stay where it is safe." The recording captured a response from Vance. His voice was quieter, controlled. He said, "I am safe." The second voice replied immediately, "No. You are visible." There was a pause. Then Vance said something that did not make sense at the time. He said, "I can't see it anymore." After that, there was a sound. Not movement. Not water. A pressure shift, like something displacing air very close to the microphone. Then, silence. Rule 2 was written the same week. Rule 2 states, "Do not step onto terrain that appears where it should not exist. It does not matter if it looks stable. It does not matter if it supports weight. If it was not there before, it is not ground." Since that rule was implemented, there have been 3 attempted violations. 2 were stopped by supervising personnel. 1 was not. The third incident is Entry 5. We do not talk about Entry 5 during training, not because it is worse, but because it is the one that proves something we did not want to confirm. The swamp is not creating illusions. It is creating conditions. And those conditions are not meant to trick you. They are meant to test what you will accept as real. That is the difference between confusion and adaptation. Animals confuse. This does not. By the time Rule 3 was written, we stopped referring to the entries as incidents. We started calling them interactions. Because that is what they are. The swamp does not act randomly. It responds. It observes behavior. And then it adjusts. Rule 3 came after we realized something else. It does not need you to move toward it. It can wait for you to stay. By the time Rule 3 was written, we had already made the mistake of thinking we understood the boundaries. We believed the first 2 rules defined the limits of interaction. Do not follow voices. Do not trust terrain. That felt manageable. Contained. Like a system you could train around. That assumption cost us 2 people in the same night. Rule 3 was written in late 2012. It followed a joint patrol incident during flood recession season. Water levels had begun to drop, but the ground had not stabilized yet. That period is always the most deceptive. The swamp looks safer than it is. It feels more navigable. It invites you to move deeper. We assigned 2 rangers to night perimeter observation. Standard procedure. Paired patrol. Continuous radio contact. Fixed loop route along the eastern boundary near Cedar Creek. Their names were Luis Herrera and Jason Pike. Both experienced. Both had completed advanced terrain response training. Neither of them had prior violations. At 21:08 hours, they checked in at marker E17. Everything was normal. Audio was clear. Background noise consistent. No anomalies reported. At 21:26 hours, Pike reported visual contact with what he described as still water behaving incorrectly. That is the exact phrase. Command requested clarification. Pike said the water ahead was not reflecting movement. Not theirs. Not the trees. Not the sky. Herrera confirmed. They were instructed to halt and observe from distance. They did not advance. They did not break Rule 1 or Rule 2. That is important. They followed procedure. At 21:31 hours, Herrera reported something else. He said it's not moving because it's not water. There was no elaboration. Command instructed immediate withdrawal to last confirmed stable ground. They acknowledged. They did not move. That delay lasted approximately 14 seconds. That is all it took. At 21:31,019, Pike said, "It's closer." Command asked what was closer. There was no answer. At 21:31,027, Herrera said, "Do not step back." That statement contradicts standard training. When encountering unstable terrain, you step back. You create distance. He said not to. At 21:31:31, Pike asked, "Why?" Herrera responded, "Because it's behind us now." There was no recorded movement sound, no water displacement, no environmental shift. But both of them reacted at the same time. Their breathing changed. Not panic, not running. Controlled, like they were trying not to move. Command issued immediate retreat order. No response. At 21:31,046, Pike said something that became the foundation of Rule 3. He said, "It stops when we stop." There was a pause. Then Herrera said, "Do not move." Command repeated retreat order. No response. For the next 3 minutes there was only audio of breathing. Steady, controlled, increasingly strained. At 21:34:12, Pike broke. He said, "I can't hold this." Herrera said, "If you move, it closes." Pike said, "It's already closing." Then there was a sound. Not footsteps, not water. A compression, like pressure being applied from multiple sides at once. Pike screamed. The transmission cut for half a second, then resumed. Herrera was still there, breathing, alone. Command instructed immediate extraction path. No response. At 21:34:29, Herrera spoke. His voice was level. He said, "It doesn't like movement. It tracks it." There was another pause. Then he said something else. "It learns distance." Those were his last words. Signal ended at 21:34,036. Recovery team deployed at first light. They found Herrera at 06:02 hours. Standing, not submerged, not floating, standing in water that measured just under chest depth. Same as entry 2. His body was intact, no visible trauma. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest. That classification was later amended, not because it was incorrect, because it was incomplete. There were marks, not injuries, impressions. As if something had applied pressure evenly across his entire body. No grip points, no claws, no teeth, just compression. Pike was not recovered. Not that day. Not any day after. There were no tracks, no equipment, no sign he had ever been there beyond the audio log. Rule 3 was written immediately. Rule 3 states, if an anomaly responds to your movement, you must not remain stationary within its range. This contradicts standard instinct. When something tracks movement, you freeze. That works with animals. It does not work here. Because this is not tracking you. It is measuring you. Herrera understood that too late. He thought stillness would make him invisible. What it did was allow it to close distance without resistance. Pike moved. Herrera did not. Neither of them survived. Different choices. Same outcome. That is when we understood something critical. The rules do not protect you. They only prevent you from making the worst possible decision in that moment. There is no correct decision, only less efficient ways to be taken. By the time we documented Entry 4, we stopped asking what it was. We started asking what it wanted. And the answer was consistent. It wanted you to choose. Movement or stillness. Sound or silence. Help or distance. Every rule exists to remove one of those choices. Because if you are allowed to choose freely, you will choose wrong. Every time. By the time Entry 4 was documented, we had already lost the ability to treat the rules as isolated responses. Up to that point, each rule felt like a correction, a reaction to a specific type of mistake. Do not follow. Do not step. Do not remain still. But Entry 4 proved something we were not prepared to accept. The rules were not separate. They were connected. And whatever was operating inside the swamp understood all of them at the same time. Rule 4 was written in 2014. Late summer, peak heat, low flood levels. That period creates the illusion of stability. More exposed ground. More defined trails. Fewer visible hazards. It is when we allow limited night access for research teams. That decision has been revised since. The incident involved a contracted ecological survey group. 3 individuals. All credentialed. All cleared for restricted access under Ranger's supervision. We assigned 1 ranger to accompany them. His name was Caleb Rourke. 12 years in service. 5 of those inside Congaree. Reliable. Methodical. No prior incidents. No recorded hesitation under pressure. They entered the floodplain at 1910 hours. The objective was simple. Soil sampling along a map-dry corridor that had formed due to seasonal recession. The route was pre-approved. Marked. Verified earlier that day. At 20:02 hours, Rourke reported successful entry into the corridor. Everything was consistent. At 20:19 hours, one of the survey members reported hearing footsteps behind the group. Not approaching. Matching. That detail matters. They stopped. The footsteps stopped. They moved. The footsteps resumed. Standard assumption would be another ranger, or wildlife adjusting pace. Rourke performed a visual check. No one was there. He reported it as possible echo distortion. That was the first mistake. Not breaking a rule. Misidentifying the pattern. At 20:27 hours, the second survey member reported hearing their own voice behind them, repeating what they had just said, delayed by approximately 2 seconds. That is not environmental. That is not echo. That is replication. Rourke issued immediate hold. He did not advance. He did not retreat. He attempted to maintain control of the situation. That is where Rule 4 intersects with the others. Holding position is not neutral. Not here. At 20:29 hours, audio logs captured the first confirmed duplication event. One of the survey members spoke. The same sentence was repeated behind them. Identical tone. Identical pacing. Not distorted. Perfect. Rourke requested visual confirmation. He turned. There was no one there. But the audio log picked up something else. A second set of footsteps. Not matching now. Offset. Moving independently. That is when he should have initiated immediate withdrawal. He did not. Because no existing rule at that time addressed duplication. He was trying to classify it. Trying to understand it. That delay lasted 43 seconds. At 20:30 hours, one of the survey members turned without instruction. That is the moment everything changed. Because the duplication stopped. Completely. Silence. No footsteps. No voice. Nothing. Rourke reported loss of anomaly. He attempted to re-establish control. He told them to continue forward. That decision created the condition that Rule 4 was written to prevent. At 20:31 hours, the third survey member spoke. He said, "There's someone ahead of us." That was not possible. The corridor had been cleared. Rourke moved to front position. He confirmed visual. There was a figure standing approximately 15 meters ahead. Stationary. Facing away. Human silhouette. No movement. Rourke issued verbal command. No response. He repeated. No response. The figure did not move. One of the survey members said something that appears in the audio log. He said, "It's one of us." That statement should not have been possible. There were 4 of them. All accounted for. And yet the perception was immediate. Recognition without confirmation. That is the mechanism. It does not show you something unknown. It shows you something you accept. Rourke instructed the group to stay back. He approached alone. That is the moment Rule 4 exists to prevent. At approximately 10 meters distance, the figure shifted. Not turned, shifted, like it adjusted position without stepping. Rourke stopped. He reported visual distortion. He said, "It's not stable." Then the figure spoke. Not loudly, not clearly, but enough for the audio log to capture. It said, "You're out of position." That phrase is not random. It is procedural language. That is what we use. That is how we speak during operations. It was speaking to him in his own structure. Rourke responded. He said, "Identify yourself." There was no answer. Instead, the figure moved. Not forward. Not backward. Closer. Without crossing the space. Distance changed without motion. At that point, one of the survey members broke formation. He stepped forward. Rourke told him to stop. He did not stop. Because he believed the figure was part of the team. Because it looked correct. Because it sounded correct. Because it used the right words. That is how Rule 4 connects to the others. It does not need you to move toward it. It only needs you to accept it as already present. The moment the survey member closed within 5 meters, the audio log captured something that had not been recorded before. The sound of multiple voices speaking at once. All identical. All saying the same thing. You are out of position. Then the recording distorted. Not cut. Distorted. Like the microphone was receiving too much input at once. Rourke shouted for retreat. Too late. 2 of the survey members ran. 1 moved forward. Rourke stayed. He tried to regain control. That is the last confirmed moment of coordinated human behavior. The rest is fragments, movement, water displacement, voices overlapping, commands repeated, none of it coherent. Recovery team entered at first light. They found one survivor. Rourke. He was seated on a cypress root, dry, completely dry, in an area that was submerged to knee depth. He did not respond to verbal contact. He did not react to physical contact. He was conscious, eyes open, tracking movement, but not engaging. The 2 survey members who ran were recovered later that day, both deceased. No external injuries. Cause of death listed as drowning. The 3rd survey member was never recovered, not one piece of equipment, not one trace, as if he had never entered. Rourke remained in that state for 9 days. On the 10th day he spoke, only once. He said, "There were more of us than there should have been." Then he stopped speaking again. Rule 4 was written immediately after. Rule 4 states, if you encounter a person where no person should be, you must not acknowledge them as human. Do not speak to them. Do not approach them. Do not allow them to enter your formation. If you accept them, even for a moment, they are already inside your perimeter. And once they are inside, the rules stop applying. Because at that point, it is no longer outside you. It is part of your count. By entry 4, we understood something we could not correct. The system was not containing the threat. The system was being studied by it. Every rule we wrote became something it learned to work around, not by breaking them, by using them. And we were still documenting, still writing, still pretending that defining behavior meant controlling it. By the time entry 5 occurred, we stopped believing that. Entry 5 is the one we do not include in standard briefings, not because it is the most violent, not because it is the most complex. We exclude it because it removes the last assumption that keeps people functional. Up to entry 4, there was still a belief that awareness created distance, that if you understood the pattern, you could avoid full engagement, that the rules, even if incomplete, created a boundary. Entry 5 proved that the boundary does not exist. Rule 5 was written in early 2015. Late winter. Flood levels were low. Visibility was higher than usual. The terrain, on the surface, appeared stable. That is why the operation was approved. We had a controlled sweep scheduled. Not a patrol. Not a response. A sweep. The objective was to verify the integrity of marked safe routes and confirm that prior anomaly zones were inactive. This was not something we did often. It required clearance. It required a full team. 6 personnel entered the swamp at 1640 hours, 5 rangers, 1 supervisory officer. I was there. This is the only entry in the report where I am not reading from a log. I am the log. We moved in standard formation. 2 forward, 2 mid, 2 rear. Continuous spacing, visual confirmation maintained at all times. The air felt wrong before we crossed the second marker. That is the only way to describe it. Not heavier, not colder. Structured. Like the space we were moving through had boundaries that were not visible but were present. No one said anything at first, because acknowledging it makes it real. At 1712 hours, we reached the first anomaly marker from entry 2. There was nothing there. No dry ground. No visual distortion. Water depth was consistent. Movement normal. Light behaving correctly. We logged it as inactive. That was the first error, not because the observation was wrong, because we assumed absence meant safety. At 1726 hours, the rear position reported a count discrepancy. That should not be possible. We were in visual range. Spacing was tight. 6 personnel. Always 6. He said, I have 7. We stopped. Immediate count verification. 6. Everyone accounted for. We confirmed visually. We confirmed by voice. We confirmed by position. 6. The rear ranger apologized. He said it was a miscount. We moved. At 17:31 hours, the forward position reported the same thing. He said, "We're off by 1, we stopped again. Count. 6. Always 6. No one was missing. No one was extra. Everything was correct. Except the feeling that it was not. This is where entry 5 diverges from everything before it. There was no voice, no figure, no terrain anomaly, nothing external. The disruption was internal. Perception. Counting. Awareness. At 17:34 hours, the supervisor made a decision. He ordered a structured count rotation. Each person would call the next in sequence, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, a closed loop, no gaps, no overlap. We started. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then something happened that is not recorded in any other entry. The loop did not stop. After 6, there was another response. 7. No one said it. But it was heard. Clear. In sequence. In place. We all reacted at the same time. Because we all heard it. And none of us had spoken. The supervisor ordered immediate silence. No one moved. No one spoke. At 17:35 hours, he gave a new instruction. We would count again. But this time, only he would speak. We would respond by raising a hand. No voice, no duplication. We began. He pointed. 1. Hand raised. 2. Hand raised. 3. Hand raised. 4. Hand raised. 5. Hand raised. 6. Hand raised. He stopped. No continuation, no seventh, no extra. Everything was correct. That should have resolved it. It did not. Because we still felt it. 7. The presence of one more. Not seen, not heard, but accounted for somewhere that was not visible. At 17:38 hours, the rear ranger spoke without instruction. He said, "It's between us." That statement should not make sense. Spacing was controlled. There was no space for something to be between, unless it was not occupying physical distance the way we understood it. The supervisor ordered immediate exit, no deviation, straight line withdrawal. We turned. We began moving. At 17:39 hours, the count broke again. This time, it did not present as an extra. It presented as a loss. The forward ranger said, "We're missing 1. We stopped. Count. 6. All present. No one missing." But the feeling reversed. Instead of 7, it was 5. Like one of us had been removed from awareness without being removed from position. That is when I understood something that is still not written correctly in the report. It does not add or remove people. It changes your ability to perceive them. And once that starts, you cannot trust the count. At 17:41 hours, the supervisor made the worst possible decision. He tried to identify the error. He started asking names. Sequential. Direct. Each person responded. Correctly. Then he hesitated, because when he got to the 4th name, 2 people answered. Same voice, same tone, same timing. Perfect. We all heard it. We all saw both of them, and for a moment, both were correct. That is the moment the system failed. Because the rules do not account for duplication inside the group. They only account for intrusion from outside. At 17:42 hours, formation broke. Not completely, but enough. Spacing shifted. Lines crossed. Visual confirmation was no longer stable. That is all it needed. The next 30 seconds are not clear, not because of missing data, because of conflicting memory. We all remember it differently. But the outcome is consistent. We exited with 5. Not 6. 5. No one saw who was gone. No one saw when it happened. No one can agree on who it was. That is the part that is not included in any official record. We cannot identify the missing individual, not by name, not by role, not by position. There is a gap in the roster that cannot be filled. Personnel records show 6 entries. Debrief reports show 5 accounts. 1 is missing, but no one can say which one. That is what entry 5 proves. It does not need to take you physically. It can remove you from recognition, from memory, from count. Rule 5 was written after that. Rule 5 states, Never rely on headcount as confirmation of group integrity. If the number feels wrong, it is already compromised. You must exit immediately. Do not verify, do not recount, do not correct, because the moment you attempt to confirm who belongs, you give it the opportunity to redefine that answer. And once it does, you will not know what was changed. We lost someone that day. I know that. I just do not know who. And that is worse than knowing. Because it means whatever took them did not just remove them from the swamp. It removed them from us. By the time we documented Entry 6, we stopped using the word missing. We started using a different term, unrecognized. By the time Entry 6 was documented, we had already accepted something that should have ended operations entirely. We could not trust memory. Not fully. Not consistently. Not under exposure. Up to Entry 5, there was still a structure we believed in. Even if the rules were incomplete, even if the system was failing, we still believed observation had value, that recording something meant preserving it. Entry 6 proved that was not true. Because what you record is still filtered through what you are allowed to perceive. Rule 6 was written in late 2016, early fall. Water levels were moderate. Visibility was clear enough for standard navigation. Conditions were considered stable. We were wrong. The incident involved a solo monitoring assignment. That in itself should not have been allowed, but staffing shortages had already begun affecting rotation schedules. The ranger assigned was senior, 15 years in service, 7 inside Congaree. No violations, no anomalies tied to his record. His assignment was simple. Fixed observation at a designated point near the northern boundary, 8-hour shift, stationary monitoring, periodic radio check-ins. He established position at 18:05 hours, first check-in at 18:30. Normal. Second at 19 Neuroloro. Normal. At 19:30 he reported something unusual. He said, "I can hear myself moving." Command requested clarification. He said, "Not echo, not delay. It's ahead of me." That statement was logged but not escalated. That was the first failure, because it did not match any existing rule. At 1947, he reported visual confirmation. He said, "There's someone walking my path. He was stationary. He had not moved since 18:05. And yet he was describing movement that matched his own route." Command instructed him to maintain position and avoid engagement. He acknowledged. At 1952, he said something that appears in the log exactly as spoken. He said, "It stopped when I noticed it. That aligns with prior patterns." Observation changes behavior. At 20:03, he reported that the figure resumed movement, but this time it was not ahead of him. It was behind, following the same path he had taken to reach his position. That should not have been possible, because he had not moved. There was no path, no disturbance, nothing to follow. At 2011, the first audio irregularity appeared. Background noise shifted, not increased, structured. Similar to what we experienced during Entry 5, defined space without visible boundaries. At 2014, he said, "It's catching up." Command instructed immediate withdrawal. He did not move. He said, "If I move, it matches. That is consistent with Entry 3. Movement triggers response, but staying still does not stop it." We had already learned that. He had not experienced it directly. That delay cost him. At 2016, he said, "It's beside me." There was no secondary voice, no footsteps, nothing external. But his breathing changed. He was tracking something that was not producing sound. At 2017, he said something that does not appear in any prior entry. He said, "It's not copying me. It's correcting me." Command requested clarification. He did not respond. At 2018, the audio log captured a second set of movement. Not environmental, not wildlife, deliberate, measured, synchronized with his breathing. At 2019, he began describing it. He said, "It's doing what I should have done. That is the first time we heard that phrasing, not imitation, correction. At 2020, he said, "It moved before I did." That is when we understood the sequence was reversed. It was not following him. He was following it, without moving. At 2021, he stood. That was not instructed. That was not part of the protocol. He stood because it had already stood. He said, "I have to match it." Command ordered him to remain stationary. He did not comply. At 2022, he took a step. At the exact same time, the second movement was recorded. Perfect synchronization. At 2023, he said, "If I stop, it adjusts." At 2024, he said, "I'm behind." That statement is critical, because it confirms what Entry 6 represents. It establishes a version of you that exists ahead of your actions. And once you become aware of it, you begin to align with it. At 2025, he said, "It's closer to the exit than I am." He began moving faster. Command instructed immediate stop. He did not respond. At 2026, he was running. Audio confirms water displacement. Breathing elevated. No external pursuit, nothing chasing him. And yet he was trying to catch something. At 2027, he said, "If I reach where it was, I can correct it." That logic is the mechanism. Belief that alignment restores control, it does not. At 2028, he stopped, abruptly, no transition. At 2028-14, he said, "I'm in the wrong place." At 2028-19, he said, "It already left." At 2028-25, the audio cut, not distorted, not interrupted, ended. Recovery team deployed immediately. They reached his last known coordinates at 0550 hours. They found him. Standing, same as Entry 2, same as Entry 3, just deep water. No support. No movement. Body intact. Cause of death listed as drowning. Time of death estimated at approximately 21:00 hours. That places a gap of over 30 minutes between final transmission and death. He had been standing, alive, following something that was no longer there. Rule 6 was written immediately. Rule 6 states, if you perceive a version of yourself acting independently of your current position, you must disengage immediately. Do not observe it. Do not follow it. Do not attempt to align with it. Because the moment you accept that it is more correct than you are, you will begin to replace your own actions with its sequence. And once that happens, you are no longer determining your movement. You are inheriting it. By Entry 6, we understood something that cannot be corrected. It is not observing you to imitate you. It is establishing a version of you that it prefers. And then, it waits for you to become it. We had 6 rules. 6 documented interactions. And every one of them proved the same thing. The system was not containing anything. It was documenting how we fail. There were still 6 more entries, and each one is worse. Because by that point, it no longer needed to stay outside the group. It no longer needed to stay outside the body. It only needed one thing: agreement.